the stories and the narratives that might be based on really old conditioning. Some of us bring stories from early childhood trauma, and it doesn't have to be big trauma. It could be small trauma, right? So I guess the whole point is deconstruct old conditioning to reconstruct the new you. And I can tell you what happens is...
Awekenge, this is Mental Mythos, hosted by Asagot Toto.
You mentioned experiencing a breakdown in 2001 despite achieving what many would consider the epitome of success. Can you elaborate on what led to that turning point and what it felt like mentally and emotionally?
Sure. I know exactly what happened. For 10 or 15 years, tried to achieve quote unquote success, right? And for me, success was, at that time anyway, was all about external things, externality. It was all about what were you showing on the outside? So I spent a very long time trying to get and be and have and do all of those things which were considered the markers of success. And they still are all over the world. So it was really a race against the clock to get to a destination that was all about external things. But what happened in that process is that I became really very depressed, very sad, very anxious, very empty. So to kind of answer the question about how did it feel, I mean, it just felt awful. You spend 10 or 15 years trying to get to something and get to somewhere and have something and be all those things. And the result for me was being completely empty and stressed out and on a path to certainly a heart attack or high blood pressure. I suspect I would have probably had a heart attack if I kept up at that pace. It was friends that told me to stop and slow down and to start to think about alternative health or ancient wisdom or ways to reframe and rethink everything, because I got to that point just completely empty, sad, depressed, probably completely not very friendly, and surrounded by things that did nothing for me. So it was a pretty awful time.
And actually, I agree with you. When it comes to success, we only think about the material things. And I feel like another thing that has an impact in that is the society as a whole, as what it has, what it defined what is success in general. So I agree with you. In terms of how did your work with in Swiss banking contribute to the first?
Industry, right? I don't think it was Swiss banking or financial services that led to my sort of hitting a wall. I probably, if I had chosen something else like an entrepreneurial path or any other sort of pathway to success, I probably would have arrived at the same destination. I don't think it was the job per se. It was just me trying to get somewhere thanks to that job. So the job was really just a vehicle to get to the place that I wanted to get to, or the place that I thought I had to get to. So I wouldn't blame financial services on it, but it was the delivery mechanism for sure.
And it's something that we don't actually, so when it comes to success and definitely emotionally, something that we don't consider. For someone who is chasing success, someone who sees success as this
material,
what advice would you give them?
Let's stop. Don't do it. The one thing that you've got to do if you are chasing rainbows and unicorns to get to some quote unquote successful place is stop in your tracks. And you want to stop and recognize that success is completely inward and it has nothing to do with anything that society says it should be, or any of the things we've learned or taught in school, etc. You've got to make success internal, right? And it has nothing to do with purchasing anything. It has nothing to do with a job or a job description or a job title. It has nothing to do with the external markers of what our modern culture, in the West at least, thinks is a definition of success. So my advice is stop, redefine and rethink what success is for you. And in that process, become mindful about checking in on yourself constantly, because we live in this society, this world of consumption and success and wealth and power and everything, private jets and super yachts and blah, 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 right? But that's not where you find success. Success is found within you, within your mind. And so long answer to say, just stop and reevaluate and rethink.
And you spoke about rethinking it. shifting the conversation to personal transformation, what steps did you take to rethink everything from scratch in terms of what is the main purpose about, what is the main goal of trying to reach success?
Well, I think I see journey or path in 3 chapters, right? That first chapter was I was seeking fabulous, and then I hit that wall. The second chapter was all about discovery. So I had, in the early part of my career or my life, I had never studied or looked into or dived into or read about anything metaphysical, anything spiritual, anything related to faith, anything related to quantum physics. For me, none of that existed. And so I dove into every self-help book, every spiritual bookshop I could find, and I began to kind of expand my horizon on what life is all about and what it might mean to be here and what might my purpose be. But I had to go back to school. So very much about re-education. Okay. And that's what I would suggest to anybody that's listening is it's never too late to go back to the school of life. Right? And because I was never taught any of that, and especially guys, right? Men are not taught to, well, maybe on a faith base or a religion base, but we're really not taught to strive for success within us, right? We're taught to strive for success outside of us. So for me, it was like a re-education at the age of 35. I had to kind of go back to the drawing board, and I did it. I mean, I don't know if I told you, but I gave pretty much everything I owned. I gave it all away. And I started from scratch, and it was almost a cleansing, right? To get away from the trappings of the success, which wasn't success at all. It was just, like I said, a big trap. So anybody listening, the first step is stop, rethink what success is. The second step is really educate yourself, go outside your echo chamber, listen to different teachers and pathways and experiences. So often, I think with social media and just the world we're living in these days, we begin to believe our own thoughts, right? And we work in a bubble, but that's never very healthy. So step 3, I think, is really get out of your comfort zone and start learning something new. Go back to school, not university or high school, but just go back to the school of life and start reading ancient Greek mythology, texts, historians, history. Dive into this stuff. Because what you can consume today on X or on Facebook or any other of the social media platforms is not necessarily enriching you. It can often be depleting you. So, yeah.
I love the fact that you said that it's never too late to go back to the school of life. And also, at some point, as someone who, as you've mentioned, that as men, we are not taught to reach success within, whereas how I interpreted that in terms of taking care of yourself, being able to be happy with yourself before. When I said be happy with yourself, I'm including things of self-love and being able to appreciate yourself more.
Sure.
In terms of that. And at some point, I was in that stage where I didn't appreciate myself, didn't love myself. And I concluded that I needed someone else to love me in order for me to love myself. So that's where I started reading some books. I started buying books. So really the books that I read was by Barack Obama. And I don't know how I moved from those kind of books to psychology, whereas I read Friedrich Nietzsche and was this author again, by Marcus Aurelius, so that's where I've learned I need to love myself. I need to be within myself. I really started to know that loving myself is the best thing that I could have. I've ever had.
Absolutely. 100%.
And also you spoke about discovery. And on the so that actually you mentioned something that discovered the humanity and in terms of helping people. How would you explain how can you explain this discover the humanity?
I think it's for me, it's about recognizing that we are all together on this one little speck of dust flying through a galaxy that we know really not a whole lot about. And I think it's easy for all of us, right? No matter where you live in the world and no matter what you do, to get caught up in the day-to-day, right? To get caught up in the drama of your life, right? Or the unfolding of your life. And it also creates division, right? And it creates separation between us. So what I'm trying to say to people is, just let's all remember we're one lineage on this little planet. If people could start to remember that, I think our food supply would be different. I think our medical system would be different. I think our military industrial complexes would be different. So for me, it's just kind of a battle cry to say, remember we're all humanity on one little rock and let's come together as opposed to separate ourselves. And I know that sounds like, sounds like a Beatles song, but, I think it's kind of even more relevant today.
You said that you followed everything. You started from scratch. Yeah. So how did you grapple with the financial and emotional challenges of starting over?
Oh, that's a good question. It was hell. It was really, really hard because I had to go and do kind of jobs that I hadn't wanted to do. I didn't think I ever would do again, but I knew I had to start from scratch. So it was painful on one side, and I had to declare a personal bankruptcy at one point, even, it's been 25 years ago now, but it was very hard, but I knew that it was even harder on the other side. So I recognized that sort of financial hardship and the work that I had to do. I said to myself, this is temporary because I'm going to get to the other side and be a whole human again, right? Whereas the opposite was surely an early demise with a heart attack and high blood pressure. But I just knew that it was going to be temporary. So I guess that's how I got through it.
Knowing that it was temporary, for example, starting things off, I would say that the things over in terms of changing a career path. It might have, in your perspective, I think it could have been very hard of letting them go because letting things go most of the time hard in terms of mental health, in terms of letting go people that are not good for you, people who keep on crossing your boundaries in a way, and you love those people, but you can't just let them go. I think that's how I look at that. The team, it was very hard. And also trying new things or change is very discomforting. Sometimes have this perception of staying in their comfortable zone and not allowing ourselves to face adversity. So I applaud you for that and able to start from scratch. That take that big. Definitely not knowing that, how would you go forward and be able to? And also you mentioned that you were bankrupt through money, as you mentioned that as the way you saw success as material things. So I would like to go deeply into your career path. Your career path has been incredibly diverse with experience ranging from leisure travel to personal struggle. How do you think these contrasting experiences shaped your approach to mental health?
I think the one thing that it did was allowed me to be much more fearless. Okay. So I think because of the career that I've had to dive in the deep end without knowing what's happening, what's going on, without necessarily an exact plan. So I don't know if the fearlessness came first or the trials and tribulations and keep on going and keep trying and keep pushing and keep exploring made me fearless. But certainly what it did, my career and my experience has brought me to this place of understanding that we are living beings, right? That live based on narratives and stories that we are telling ourselves in our head. The career that I've had has allowed me to get to a point where I can say with authority, I think that we can deconstruct the stories in our head to reconstruct new ones. And what you want to do is live a life without old past conditioning clouding your vision, right? So I often say to people that if you're troubled, if you're not feeling centered, if you're off, if you're going through a hard time, you might not be looking at life through clear lenses, okay? And as you know, like from your webcam, if you've got a lens that isn't working and you're making all of your life choices based on this lack of clarity, I say to people, let's clean the lenses. Let's get rid of the old stories. Let's break down the stories and the narratives that might be based on really old conditioning. Some of us bring stories from early childhood trauma, and it doesn't have to be big trauma. It could be small trauma, right? So I guess the whole point is deconstruct old conditioning to reconstruct the new you. And I can tell you what happens is that process is very freeing. It liberates you. That liberation really allows you to become much more untethered, much more unlimited. There's many more possibilities, right? So that for me is the big lesson, right? So I've traveled the world. I've lived all over the place. I've had lots of varied experiences, but the culmination of it all is just do it, deconstruct those narratives, reconstruct new ones, and become untethered because you deserve it. We all deserve to live a free existence, right? Like a free life, free from psychological suffering. And that's really what I do in most of the work that I do.
Yeah. I love the word that you use. You use the word liberation. And sometimes we are in a way slaves we are enslaved by our own minds in a way of thinking that this way of thinking is right.